My father has always had disastrous luck with women. It's almost as if he emits some invisible signal that draws in chaos. Every woman he's seriously dated, except for his current partner, has been abusive in some way, emotionally or physically. That list includes my own mother, unfortunately. But this story is about the last woman he dated before he finally found peace, a woman named Lysandra. They met at a Christmas party in Flagstaff, Arizona, not long after he'd ended a messy on-again, off-again relationship with a woman who had all the hallmarks of a narcissist. That relationship had lasted 3 years too long, and my father was emotionally drained. When Lysandra walked into his life, she seemed different. She told him she, too, had escaped a toxic marriage and was just looking for peace. She had a soft-spoken presence, and he was drawn to the way she seemed to understand pain. They started seeing each other regularly. But from the beginning, things were slightly off. She never let him visit her home in Santa Fe, always insisting on meeting at his place or neutral locations. At first, he didn't push it. He figured she might have her reasons. Maybe she was still recovering emotionally. That changed when he received a phone call from a man claiming to be Lysandra's husband. The man wanted to know how my father knew his wife. My dad, naturally, assumed this was an abusive ex trying to control her. But as time passed and details began to unravel, he started to feel uneasy. Lysandra had said her ex wouldn't sign the divorce papers, but that they were separated. Still, my dad couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Eventually, he decided to ask questions. He spoke to people close to her parents, a few friends. What he discovered left him stunned. Not only was Lysandra still married, but according to everyone in her life, she wasn't even separated. She was in fact happily married. And my father? He was either a well-kept secret or passed off as a casual friend, if they knew about him at all. He ended things immediately. That's when the nightmare began. Lysandra did not take the breakup well. She started showing up uninvited, at his office in Topeka, at his apartment, even at events where she couldn't have known he would be. She called in the middle of the night, sent dozens of texts at a time, left voicemails that started with apologies and ended in unhinged threats. My father changed his number. He moved to a different state, twice. First to Missoula, then to Duluth. And yet, she always found him. Sometimes it was a letter in the mail, handwritten, pages long. Other times it was a random call from a new number, just to say she missed him. Eventually, Lysandra found a new angle, me. At this point, my father had moved in with me in Cedar Rapids. I was married and had a daughter. Somehow, Lysandra got my phone number. She began texting me, just as obsessively as she had my dad. Most of the messages were about my daughter. She referred to her as her granddaughter and sent gifts. Packages would arrive directly from stores, wrapped and addressed with unsettling familiarity. I never responded. I returned what I could unopened or donated the rest. It escalated again one summer evening. My father had just applied for a restraining order. That same day, Lysandra showed up at his home while he was at work. She handed his roommate a box of cereal and said it was because she'd noticed my dad had lost weight. He was horrified. He told his roommate to throw it out. He didn't want to risk it being tampered with. That night, she came to my apartment. It was 1:15 a.m. My husband was working the overnight shift, and thankfully, my daughter was spending the night at my aunt and uncle's place. I was alone. The knocking started softly. Then it grew louder. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach twist. It was Lysandra. She was standing there holding a loaf of banana bread. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. She eventually left, and I threw the bread out as soon as my husband returned home. The next night, I again sent my daughter to my aunt's, just in case. And again, Lysandra came back. This time, she didn't just knock. She pounded on the door, sent a flurry of texts while doing so. She wanted to see her grandbaby. She wanted to have some girl time. Her texts shifted from sweet to demanding, then to disturbing. I called the police. As I was on the phone with dispatch, my neighbor stepped out. He was a retired Marine and didn't hesitate to confront her. He warned her that the cops were coming. His wife had already made a call. Lysandra bolted, running into the park across the street before the officers arrived. They didn't catch her that night, but the restraining order was granted soon after. We moved again, this time to Erie, Pennsylvania. A smaller town, a quieter life. But Lysandra still finds ways to reach me. She texts from different numbers, always asking how my dad is doing or what my daughter is up to. I never reply. I just save everything, screenshots, voicemails, texts. I keep them organized in a folder on my phone, in case I ever need to file my own restraining order. It's been over 5 years now. Every time I change my number, I hold my breath, wondering if she'll find it. Every time a strange package arrives, I wonder if it's from her. My father has since found a kind, stable woman, and they've built a quiet life together. But there are moments, still quiet moments, when I can't help but check that the doors are locked twice, or glance over my shoulder in a grocery store parking lot. Because Lysandra wasn't just a stalker. She was a warning. Okay, so, let me preface this disaster with the fact that I was bored. Like mind-numbingly bored. The kind of boredom where you find yourself deep cleaning the inside of your toaster, or considering a career as a competitive yodeler. That's where I was mentally when I re-downloaded Tinder. Normally, I avoid dating apps like expired sushi. They make me feel like a contestant on a terrible reality show where the grand prize is emotional trauma. But my best friend, let's call her Schnuggle, wouldn't shut up about how I needed to put myself out there. So fine. I swiped. I swiped like I was trying to summon a demon, or maybe just carpal tunnel. And then there she was. Nardisha. Her profile picture looked like it had been taken during golden hour on a mountain summit, wearing a leather jacket and squinting at the sun like she'd just returned from slaying a dragon. Her bio said, "Adventurous soul-seeking partner in crime. Will steal your hoodie and maybe your heart." I should have run. I should have seen the warning signs. But no. Blorbo, the emotionally fragile human dust bunny, decided to swipe right. And we matched. Our messages were witty. Flirty. She used GIFs like a pro. I told her I liked horror movies and collecting weird socks. She told me she once got kicked out of a museum for trying to pet a taxidermied moose. We agreed to meet at a bar that had quirky energy and overpriced drinks in mason jars. I showed up 5 minutes early because I'm pathologically punctual. She was already there, leaning against the bar like she owned the place, sipping something pink and dangerous. I tried to look cool. I really did. But then I tripped over literally nothing and launched my drink into the air like I was auditioning for a circus. She laughed. Not a mocking laugh, more like the kind of laugh you'd give a raccoon who just tried to steal your sandwich. And weirdly, things were good. We talked about everything: movies, music, conspiracy theories about pigeons being government drones. She was magnetic, wild, like she'd bitten into a lightning bolt and enjoyed it. Then she leaned in, her eyes glittering. "You look like you could use a little adventure," she said. That should have been my cue to go home and watch reruns of The Office in peace. But no. I nodded like an idiot. "There's this underground party," she said. "You in?" My brain screamed, "No." My mouth said, "Hell yeah." So we climbed into her Jeep, which sounded like it was held together with duct tape and spite, and bounced off into the night. The city blurred by. The bars and streetlights faded until we were in some industrial part of town that looked like a deleted scene from Mad Max. "Are we sure this is safe?" I asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "Don't be such a blorbo," she giggled. "You'll love it." We pulled up to a warehouse that looked like it had been abandoned since the 1800s and possibly haunted by the ghosts of bad decisions. Inside, it was chaos. Pulsing lights, screaming bass, people flailing as if they were being electrocuted to the beat. Nardisha grabbed my hand and dragged me into the crowd. I bumped into a guy wearing a gas mask and a woman dressed like a Victorian doll with glow sticks in her hair. This is what peak performance looks like, I thought as I tried not to cry. A few drinks in, I started to loosen up. I even danced a little, if you could call it dancing. I moved like a malfunctioning Roomba, but Nardisha didn't seem to mind. Then she leaned in. "Meet me outside in 5 minutes, she whispered. "I need something." And then she vanished. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. I started pushing through the crowd, trying to find her. No luck. My phone buzzed. It was a message from her. Back alley. "Hurry." My entire body screamed nope. But I went anyway. I stepped out into a narrow alley behind the warehouse, lit only by a flickering street lamp that looked like it was powered by regret. "Nardisha?" I called. Nothing. Then a voice from the shadows. "You shouldn't be out here alone, man." I spun around. A guy stepped out. He looked like he'd just crawled out of a dumpster behind a haunted Waffle House. "You seen Nardisha?" I asked. He gave me a slow, crooked smile. "She went that way," he said, pointing deeper into the alley. "But be careful. Things get strange out here." My fight or flight response kicked in, but unfortunately, both were malfunctioning. So I just awkwardly nodded and shuffled away. I followed the path he pointed to and ended up behind the warehouse. It was quiet, too quiet, and then I saw her, Nardisha, making out with a guy who looked like he wrestled raccoons for fun. His hands were very much not PG. I stood there, like a sad NPC in someone else's video game. She looked up, saw me, and gave a half smile. "You're still here," she said like I was a leftover casserole. I turned around and walked back to the Jeep. I didn't cry. Okay, maybe I cried a little. But I learned something that night. Never trust someone with a pet taxidermy story and a beat-up Jeep. And never, ever, follow someone into an alley behind a warehouse rave. These days, I stick to pizza and Netflix. Adventure is overrated. My name's Plibble, and I want to start this off by saying I'm not proud of what you're about to read. Actually, scratch that. I'm mortified. But if I don't tell the whole story, you're just going to think I'm some gullible buffoon with the brain power of a turnip. Which, to be fair, might not be far off. For 4 months, I thought I was talking to this gorgeous girl named Kazmira. She was 19, said she worked as a cleaner, and told me she'd just graduated. Meanwhile, I'm 24, working in IT support, and have the romantic experience of a block of unsalted butter. Never kissed a girl. Never dated anyone. Never even held hands with someone who wasn't related to me. I met Kazmira, met, on Tinder. We matched on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and I remember thinking, finally, the gods of digital romance have thrown me a bone. I didn't ask for much. Just someone to talk to, maybe watch a movie with, and eventually someone to hold hands with awkwardly while sweating profusely. Our conversation started off pretty normal. She said she liked horror movies and pineapple on pizza. Red flag, I know. And she said she had a pet ferret named Slush. I was hooked. Who wouldn't be? A girl with a weird pet and a bright smile? Count me in. After chatting daily for about 3 months, I started to feel like she was the one. I imagined our future, us buying a house, raising ferrets, maybe even naming our first child Bluetooth as a joke. I know that sounds insane, but I was in deep in a fantasy that I didn't realize was being scripted by someone else entirely. Things started to get weird on a Friday night. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through old messages, wondering if I should finally ask Kazmira out. I was terrified. I'd never been on a date before, so in my head I was like, do I say, want to go to a cafe? Or is that too basic? Should I suggest bowling? Is bowling romantic? Before I could overthink myself into a coma, she messaged me. Hey, what are you currently doing? I assumed she meant work or hobbies, so I responded vaguely, just doing some revision and project stuff for work. She replied with a bunch of laughing emojis. No, silly. I mean, what are you doing right now? Like, physically. This was the first real red flag. I remember squinting at the screen like, wait, what? I told her I was lying on my bed. She immediately started sending messages that got weird. I just got out of the shower, she wrote. Wish you were here to dry me off. I didn't know what to say. I'd never sexted before. Heck, I'd never even flirted successfully. But she kept pushing. Send me a pic face blowing a kiss, she wrote. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the camera icon, like it was a detonator. Then she sent a photo. It was of her, or someone I thought was her, wrapped in a towel, with the towel accidentally slipping off. My brain short-circuited. I was like, okay, this is happening. This is real. I'm in an adult situation now. I sent a photo back. I won't go into details, but let's just say it wasn't PG-13. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was ashamed, at least not yet, but because I felt euphoric. For the first time, I felt like someone wanted me. Like, actually wanted me. I was addicted to that feeling. The next few days, we messaged constantly. I gave her my phone number, started telling her about my family, my job, even the weird mole on my left shoulder that looks like a tiny Abraham Lincoln. I trusted this girl with everything. Then, the second red flag hit me like a sock full of pennies. One day she messaged, "Haha, I love that green fire hydrant on your street. It's so quirky." I froze. The fire hydrant on my street had been painted green by some neighborhood kid as a prank. It wasn't public knowledge, and I sure as heck hadn't mentioned it to her. That's when the paranoia kicked in. I live on a cul-de-sac. One way in, one way out. It's not a street you just pass through. For her to know about that fire hydrant, she had to have seen it herself. Maybe she drove by after I gave her my street name? I told myself, but that didn't sit right either. Who drives to a random guy's street just to look at a fire hydrant and not even say hi? I stopped messaging her for a few days. I kept looking out my window, half expecting her, or someone, to be watching me. But then came the flood of messages. Hey, what's wrong? Hey, can we talk? Hey, wanna have fun again? Smiling face with horns. Hey, I miss you. I was torn. Part of me, a dumb, hormone-fueled part, still believed she was real. That maybe, just maybe, I was overreacting. So I decided to test her. Hey, can we do a video call tonight? I asked. No reply. For 4 days. That was unheard of. Kazmira always replied within minutes. Now nothing. Finally, she responded. Haha, maybe tomorrow. I'm just super busy with my studies, grinning face with sweat. I knew it. Something was up. She was dodging the call. I pressed harder. Look, if we don't video call soon, I'm blocking you. Please don't play me. I really like you. That got her attention. Okay, but I'm super shy. Please be kind, she wrote. I scheduled the call for the next night. My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. I called her on WhatsApp. The phone rang and rang and rang. Finally, someone picked up. But the camera was covered. Just a reddish blur, like someone had their thumb over the lens. Hey, are you there? I asked. No reply. Just heavy, wheezy breathing. Hello? I tried again. Kazmira? Then the thumb moved. I nearly vomited. Staring back at me wasn't a 19-year-old girl with a ferret and a towel. It was Mr. Dargle, my 94-year-old neighbor. The guy who lives 3 houses down. My jaw hit the floor. I hung up immediately and threw my phone across the room like it was cursed. Every message suddenly felt dirty. Every photo I'd sent felt like evidence in a criminal investigation. I wanted to scrub my brain clean with bleach. I blocked every contact, deleted every message. I even threw out the hoodie I was wearing that first night we sexted. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I called into work sick and spent the whole day under my blanket, trying not to scream. And Mr. Dargle? That creepy fossil had seen everything. I couldn't stay on that street. Every time I walked outside, I felt like the bushes were laughing at me. 1 week later, I packed up everything, sold the house at a loss, and moved across town. I never looked back. I still can't look a fire hydrant in the eye. It's strange how fast a day can turn. One moment you're watching someone smile, and the next, you're watching their lungs fight for air they can no longer breathe. I never thought a first date could end with sirens and tears. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Emil, and I live in a small Nordic city where the skies are often cloudy and the coffee is always strong. I work as a systems analyst, which is a polite way of saying I spend most of my day in front of a screen, solving problems no one else understands. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Predictable. Love, though? That's been anything but. I'd been single for 3 years. Not by choice. After my last relationship ended, mutual, but painful, I buried myself in work. The days bled into each other. Deadlines, meetings, frozen dinners. Rinse, repeat. I told myself I didn't need anyone. That solitude was strength. But the truth is, I was lonely. That's how I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't expecting much. Just someone to talk to. Maybe flirt. Maybe meet. I never thought I'd swipe right on someone like Sarah. Her profile was full of color. Painted murals, gallery exhibits, snapshots of old European towns. She was a visual artist, she said, and her bio read, I draw what I feel. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it's a mess. Like me. We started chatting one rainy Tuesday evening. Our conversation was effortless. She was clever, funny, and open. We talked about art, cities we wanted to visit, and our favorite kinds of bread. Hers was sourdough, mine was rye. She teased me for that. After 2 weeks of steady messaging, we decided to meet. Nothing fancy. Just a local cafe about 4 kilometers from my flat. A cozy place with big windows, warm lighting, and cinnamon pastries that made you forget the outside world. I was nervous. I picked out a sweater that didn't make me look too stiff, made sure my shoes were clean, and checked my reflection more times than I'd admit. I arrived 5 minutes late, which wasn't like me, but when I walked in and saw her standing by the counter, all nervous energy turned to awe. Sarah was even more beautiful in person. She had short auburn hair tucked behind one ear, silver rings on her fingers, and a calm presence that made the world around her seem slower. Emil, she asked, smiling. Guilty, I replied. She insisted on buying the drinks. My treat, she said, and I offered to get us pastries in return. We sat near the window, sipping coffee and sharing a strawberry tart that she said reminded her of summers in Bratislava. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years. She had a dry wit, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. After an hour, she looked at me with a mischievous glint and said, "Want to go for a drive? I know a few cool spots around the city." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because letting someone else take the lead was new for me. Still, I nodded. Her car was a small hatchback, nothing flashy. It smelled faintly of lavender and dog fur. She apologized for the mess, tossing a sketchbook and water bottle into the back seat. Before pulling out of the parking spot, she reached for an air freshener dangling from her mirror, a sleek silver canister. She sprayed it once, filling the car with a warm vanilla scent. I didn't think much of it at the time. We drove through the city, pointing out murals and buildings with odd architecture. Our conversation shifted from art to childhood memories, then to books we'd never finished. Sarah had a way of making even mundane things feel important. I remember thinking, this could be something. Then everything changed. We were turning down a quiet street near the riverbank when Sarah went silent mid-sentence. Her hands clenched the steering wheel, and she started blinking rapidly. "Sarah?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her breathing quickened, shallow and erratic. She brought one hand to her throat and gasped. I can't breathe." At first, I thought she was joking, some kind of weird prank. But then I saw her eyes, wide, terrified, locked on nothing. Her face had gone pale, and she was wheezing, struggling to suck in air. Panic surged through me. Hey, you're okay, just pull over, pull over." She managed to steer the car to the curb before her head slumped forward against the wheel. I jumped out, ran around to her side, and opened the door. She was clutching at her chest, her breath ragged and shallow. I had no idea what to do. "Sarah, are you having an asthma attack?" I asked. She nodded faintly. I fumbled for my phone and called emergency services. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "Yes, she's having an asthma attack. She's barely breathing. We're on Lovgata, just past the river bridge. Please hurry." I threw the air freshener out the window, opened all the doors, anything to circulate air. I searched her bag for an inhaler, nothing. The glove compartment, empty. My heart was pounding. I could hear her struggling, her breath coming in awful, wheezy gasps. "Where is it? Where's your inhaler?" I asked, kneeling next to her. She managed to whisper, "Trunk." I bolted to the back of the car, opened it, and found a small blue bag. Inside was her inhaler. I ran back, placed it to her mouth, and tried to help her use it. But it didn't work. Her body was too weak. Her muscles weren't cooperating. The inhaler barely registered. I felt useless. "Come on, stay with me, Sarah. Just breathe. Please." She looked at me, eyes glassy, lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. I held her hand, whispered anything I could think of, memories from our chat, promises of pastries, anything to keep her anchored. And then silence. Her eyes rolled back. Her chest stopped moving. I thought she was gone. I screamed. I begged the universe to rewind time. I would have done anything, to take that moment back. Then I heard it, the distant wail of sirens. Relief and dread crashed over me like a wave. I ran into the street, waving frantically as the ambulance turned the corner. The medics jumped out, calm and surgical in their movements. "She's had a severe asthma attack," I shouted. "The air freshener, maybe allergic." They moved quickly, oxygen mask, injection, monitoring her vitals. I stood back, useless, trembling. One of the paramedics looked at me and said, "You did good. You found the inhaler. You kept her conscious. That helped." But it didn't feel like enough. They loaded her into the ambulance. I asked if I could come. They let me sit near the back, watching as they continued treatment. Her breathing stabilized little by little. Her color returned. Her fingers stopped twitching. In the hospital, I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours, replaying everything. The air freshener. My hesitation. The look in her eyes. When they finally let me see her, she was groggy but awake. She smiled weakly and whispered, "You stayed." I nodded, choking back tears. Of course I stayed. She was kept overnight for observation. The doctors said it was a combination of asthma and an allergic reaction, likely triggered by something in the spray. They told me that without quick action, she might not have made it. I visited her again that night, brought her snacks, a sketchbook, and a cheap stuffed bear from the hospital gift shop. She laughed at how ugly it was. We kept seeing each other after that, not out of guilt or obligation, but because something real had sparked between us. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my homework notes, but really I was on Tinder. Across from me sat my mom, sipping tea and reading some article on her tablet, completely oblivious, or so I thought. I wasn't even sure why I was on the app. Boredom? Maybe loneliness? Probably both. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I wasn't looking for a circus either, which is what I got when I matched with Mark. Mark was persistent. That's probably the nicest way I can put it. I hadn't replied to a single one of his messages, and yet, he sent me 40. Yeah, 40. One after another. Without a single word in return. Who even does that? They weren't even just hi or hey beautiful types of messages. They were full-on paragraphs, jokes, random facts about his day, and questions like, how tall are you? Do you like dogs? What's your favorite cereal? Want to go for a drive tonight? I'd normally block someone like that immediately, but something about it was amusing. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of it that kept me from hitting the block button. I even counted the messages. That's how I know it was 40, because I literally scrolled back and tallied them like I was grading an exam. Eventually I gave in. I replied to his question about why I was on Tinder. Looking for a relationship, maybe a boyfriend, I wrote. Short and simple. He didn't reply immediately, which was hilarious considering how he'd been spamming me nonstop for the past 2 days. Instead, he went completely silent. 2 days later, exactly 48 hours actually, he replied. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, awesome. Do you think I'm hot? That was his response. After 2 days of silence. After 40 messages. Do you think I'm hot? I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I showed my best friend, Maya, and she snorted her drink out of her nose. He's a living meme, she said. I wasn't a cruel person, but I couldn't help myself. It became a game. I started replying with vague answers, just enough to keep the conversation going. It was something light-hearted to distract me from the stress of finals. Eventually, Maya matched with him too, on purpose, and started doing the same thing. We even made a group chat with screenshots of our conversations with Mark. It was harmless fun, or so we thought. There was something strangely robotic about Mark's messages. They all followed a pattern. He'd start with a question, then try to steer the conversation into hanging out, immediately. What are you doing now? Want to grab a coffee? Let's go for a walk. Always that day. Always right now. I ignored the invites, of course, and when I didn't reply fast enough, he'd panic. Did I say something wrong? You're ignoring me, aren't you? I knew it. I always mess things up. Then he'd flip again. Sorry, that was stupid. Let's start over. The guy was emotionally unstable, but we still didn't think he was dangerous. Not yet. I made the mistake of telling him I lived with my mom. Not the address, just that. I didn't think twice about it. It was a casual mention like, I can't talk now, my mom's calling me. That kind of thing. But then he started asking more personal questions. What part of town do you live in? What school do you go to? What's your last name again? I dodged them, giving vague answers or changing the topic. Still, he was persistent. Eventually, after dodging his latest invite to grab a drink right now, he snapped. The messages came in rapid bursts. You hate me, don't you? You never cared. No one ever does. Why do I even try? Should I just delete this app? I bet you're laughing at me. Was this all a joke to you? Then silence. For 3 days, nothing. I thought maybe he finally got the hint. Then came the message that changed everything. I will find you. Just those 4 words. No emojis. No context. No follow-up. I stared at it for a full minute before my brain accepted what I was reading. My heart started racing. I felt sick. I showed Maya, and she immediately told me to block him. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something about the way he said it. It wasn't a joke. It was a promise. I told my mom everything. I showed her the messages, the screenshots, the whole story. She flipped. Not just angry, terrified. She said we needed to call the police. I tried to calm her down, saying he probably wouldn't do anything, but deep down I was scared too. That night, I barely slept. I pushed my dresser across the door as a makeshift barricade. I knew it wouldn't stop anyone, but it made me feel a little safer. I didn't leave the house all weekend. I deleted Tinder, turned off location permissions, made my Instagram private, scrubbed everything I could think of. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. On the 4th night, I finally fell into a deep sleep. At 1:12 a.m., the doorbell rang. I shot up in bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. My room was dark, but I could see the soft glow of the hallway light under the door. Then it rang again, and again, and again. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong. I couldn't move. I was frozen. My body refused to respond. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. I couldn't even scream. My mom's voice echoed from the hallway. Who the hell is ringing the bell this late? I tried to stop her. I tried to call out, but all that came out was a choked sob. My throat was closed. My chest felt like it was being crushed. She opened my door and saw me shaking, curled up in bed, the sheets soaked. I had wet myself. Out of fear. Something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. She rushed over, trying to calm me down, asking what was wrong. I couldn't even form words. I just pointed to the window. She looked. There was a man standing at the front steps, repeatedly pressing the doorbell. He was wearing a hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. No car. No bike. Just him, standing there like he belonged. My mom opened the window and yelled, "Hey, who are you? What do you want?" The man looked up. It was Mark. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't believe it. He was here, at our house. Somehow he found me. My mom turned to me, her face pale. "Do you know him?" I couldn't speak. She didn't wait. She slammed the window shut and grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the police." Mark started pacing on the porch, muttering to himself, still ringing the bell every few seconds. His face was twisted in confusion or anger. I couldn't tell. He looked like someone who had lost his grip on reality long ago. When the police arrived, Mark tried to act normal. "I'm here to pick up my girlfriend," he told the officers. "We were supposed to go on a date." The officers pulled him aside, asked him questions, and then told him to leave the property immediately. They warned him not to come back, and that charges could be filed if he did. I never found out how he got our address. The officers said they'd investigate, but I never heard back. Maybe he pieced it together from social media. A tagged location, a background in a photo, maybe even something I said without realizing. After that night, I couldn't sleep for weeks. I kept the dresser against the door. I kept the blinds shut. I jumped at every creak in the floorboards. My mom never let me forget it. "You brought this into our home," she'd say. And she wasn't wrong. I had. I deleted every dating app. I cut off all contact with strangers online. I even changed my number. I'm sitting in my car, parked 2 blocks away from the cafe, and I've never been so grateful for silence. The date I just had with Brandon drained every ounce of social energy I had. I feel like I just attended a 4-hour lecture on apocalypse survival, coffee culture, and why memes are the purest art form known to mankind. I didn't sign up for that. I signed up for a cappuccino and a chat. Instead, I got a one-man TED Talk with no intermission. Let me start from the beginning. Brandon and I matched on Tinder a week ago. He had warm brown eyes, short curly hair, and a confident smile that made me think, okay, maybe this one's different. His bio said he was a curious thinker, lover of nature, and unapologetically real. I should have known from that last part. People who claim to be unapologetically real are often the least self-aware people on the planet. Still, our chats were light and humorous. He made a few jokes that landed, and he seemed to have genuine enthusiasm for life. At the very least, I figured it'd be an interesting experience. I told myself to keep an open mind. After all, how bad could coffee with a stranger really be? Spoiler, very bad. I got to the cafe early, like a solid 15 minutes early. I like to scope out the room, pick the best seat, and mentally prepare myself. I ordered a caramel macchiato and found a corner booth by the window. The place was cozy, all exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, and local art hanging from wires. The kind of place where everyone pretends they're writing a novel, but are really scrolling through Reddit. Then Brandon walked in. He was wearing a black t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," paired with khaki cargo shorts and hiking sandals. In March, it was 53 degrees outside. I blinked and tried to swallow the first wave of regret that hit me. "Hey," he said loudly, as if announcing himself to the entire cafe. A few heads turned. I gave a small wave and smiled, trying to suppress the sinking feeling in my gut. He sat across from me and launched straight into commentary about the vibe of the place. "It's got this post-industrial, anti-consumerist vibe, right?" He used the word vibe at least 6 more times before I could get a word in. I asked him, "So what's your go-to drink?" He leaned back, grinning like he was about to reveal a secret. "Oh, I only drink cold brew. Hot coffee is for amateurs." I smiled politely. "Why do you say that?" "It's got a better flavor profile. And honestly, hot coffee's been ruined by the corporate machine. You know, Starbucks, Dunkin'. All that watered-down nonsense. Cold brew is for people who respect the bean. I nodded slowly and took a long sip of my caramel macchiato, which was drowning in whipped cream and sugar. It was delicious, and I didn't care what Brandon thought about it. He kept going, talking about how the cafe's aesthetic reminded him of a place in Portland where he almost moved to, but didn't because of the energy. I didn't ask what that meant. I tried to change the subject. So, what do you do for work? I'm an independent consultant. What kind of consulting? I help small businesses grow their online presence. Engagement strategies, algorithm analysis, that kind of thing. Translation, he sells Instagram likes. Cool, I said, unsure how else to respond. He took this as an invitation to launch into a 15-minute speech about the evils of social media, despite the fact that his entire job revolves around it. Do you know what the real problem is? He asked. People don't know how to present authenticity. Everyone's just performing. I wanted to say, you're literally wearing a shirt that performs arrogance, but I bit my tongue. Then came the apocalypse talk. I asked him what he liked to do for fun, hoping he'd say something normal like hiking or movies. Instead, his eyes lit up. I've been deep into survival prepping lately. Oh, yeah. I follow a bunch of YouTube channels. Learn how to make fire with sticks. Purify water. Identify wild edibles. Did you know you can eat dandelions? I did not. They're actually super nutritious. I've been experimenting with wild foraging. Found some mushrooms that looked safe. Haven't tried them yet, though. Still researching. I stared at him, trying to picture this man crouched in a city park, gnawing on weeds while bypassers watched in horror. Right, I said. So you're preparing for what exactly? The collapse. Climate change, economic downfall, government control. It's all coming. You've got to be ready. He pulled out a small notebook and opened it to a page labeled Bug-Out Bag Essentials. I kid you not. He had a bulleted list of items he was collecting. Portable stove, water filters, high-calorie ration bars, a foldable shovel. I was speechless. I looked around the cafe. Everyone else was having normal conversations, laughing, reading, existing peacefully. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the middle of a doomsday prepper's PowerPoint presentation. To steer the conversation into safer territory, I mentioned that I worked as a graphic designer. He nodded, pretending to be interested, before saying, "Design is cool, but memes are where the real art is." Memes? Think about it. They spread faster than anything. They're culturally relevant, accessible, free. It's modern art for the people. Memes are fun, but design is about communication. Problem solving. Yeah, but memes are raw, unfiltered. Design is just commercial. It's corporate storytelling. I rolled my eyes internally. I didn't know how much longer I could take this. Then came his diet opinions. The waitress brought us a slice of cheesecake to share. I was hoping it would be the one redeeming part of this date. I took a bite, creamy, sweet, amazing, and just as I was about to go in for another forkful, Brandon dropped this gem. Cheesecake is basically a heart attack on a plate. You know that, right? I froze. Excuse me? No offense, just saying. Dairy, sugar, processed carbs. It's poison, really. I looked him dead in the eyes, put my fork down, and said, "Brandon, shut up." He laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. The date ended shortly after that. I told him I had to get home to finish a project. He offered to walk me to my car, but I declined. He insisted. I declined again. He finally got the message. Now here I am, sitting in my car, trying to process what just happened. My expectations were never high. I've been on enough Tinder dates to know better, but I still didn't expect to be lectured on the nutritional value of desserts and the symbolic power of memes. Brandon wasn't dangerous. He wasn't creepy. He was just insufferable and exhausting, and so far removed from reality that I felt like I needed to meditate for an hour just to balance myself again. Dating apps are wild. You never know what you're going to get. A stalker, a doomsday preacher, a guy who thinks cheesecake is a sin. Next time, I'm doing a video call first. If they can talk about bug-out bags for more than 60 seconds, I'm out. I still replay that night in my head, over and over, like a film reel stuck in a loop, refusing to let me move on. People say time dulls the edges of grief, but I don't think that's true. Not when the memory is so vivid, so painfully stitched into the fabric of your being, that even blinking feels like betrayal. It all started on a Sunday afternoon in late autumn. I was scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly, not really expecting anything to catch my attention. I didn't even use Tinder regularly. Months would pass without me opening the app, but something compelled me that day. Her name was Aliska. Unusual, like a forgotten melody you want to hear again. Her profile was sparse, but her photos were captivating. Something in her eyes hinted at depth, mischief, and maybe something broken. She messaged me first, bluntly. "Drinks?" "No hello, no introduction." I remember raising an eyebrow and replying, "How about a greeting first? Maybe a name, a how are you?" She responded with a laughing emoji and said, "Don't worry, I'm just direct. But okay, hi. How are you?" That was the start of it. The first domino. We messaged back and forth for about a month. Her tone was always erratic. One moment we were talking about films. The next she was suggesting we go on a drive to smoke something or wander around abandoned buildings. I should have seen the flags. Hell, I did see them, but I ignored them. Maybe out of loneliness. Maybe out of hope. Being a single dad at 28 wasn't something I had planned. My ex, Daria, and I had known each other since childhood. We were practically raised side by side in the same Czech village. We started dating at 15, and I thought she was the one. We had Marek when we were just 23. Then, without warning, she left. No explanation, just a note and a hollow space where our family used to be. My parents speculated she had met someone else. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. What mattered was that Marek stayed with me. He chose me. That counts for something, doesn't it? Anyway, back to Aliska. After a few weeks of inconsistent texting, I finally asked her out. She insisted on choosing the activity. I hesitated, knowing full well what she'd suggest. I wasn't wrong. She picked a nightclub downtown. A real one, she said, adding 3 fire emojis for effect. I should have said no. I paid €80 for a babysitter that night, a cost that made me wince. Aliska showed up at my door around 7 p.m. She wore a black leather jacket and a grin that hinted at trouble. Surprisingly, she was incredibly sweet with Marek. She knelt to his level, asked about his favorite cartoons, and even complimented his toy dinosaur collection. For a moment, I let my guard down. Maybe I thought, this girl isn't as chaotic as she seems. We drove to the club together. I figured if things went south, I could always drive her home. I had the keys, after all. I had control, or so I thought. The moment we stepped into the club, I knew I had made a mistake. The place was loud, packed, and smelled like sweat, sugar, and stale beer. The male-to-female ratio was unbalanced. Clearly, this was a hunting ground for desperate men and chaotic women. Aliska moved through the crowd like she owned it. She waved at bartenders, hugged random people, and ordered 3 shots before I had even found a place to sit. Then she disappeared into the restroom. 10 minutes later, she emerged with flushed cheeks, twitching fingers, and a nose redder than a winter apple. She was sneezing uncontrollably and laughing like she hadn't a care in the world. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. But I wasn't naive. I had seen this before, backstage at events, in green rooms, in alleyways behind venues. Cocaine. It was obvious. She knocked back drinks like water. I tried to pace myself with a cocktail, but she was already on her 5th by the time I finished mine. She took 4 more trips to the bathroom in the next 2 hours. Each time, she came back more disoriented, more fragile. I should have taken her home then. I should have dragged her out. But something held me back, some twisted sense of responsibility. I started seeing her not as a date, but as someone I needed to protect. She reminded me of a younger cousin I used to look after. Someone who didn't know how to say no. Someone lost. Around midnight, I told her we were leaving. Her eyes were glassy, but she nodded. Then she mumbled, "Toilet. One last time." I let her go. That's the moment that haunts me most. 15 minutes passed. I stood near the restroom, watching the door like a hawk. No sign of her. I asked a woman nearby to check if anyone was in the stalls. She came back pale, eyes wide. "There's a girl in the last stall. She's not responding." Panic. Screaming. Staff rushed in. Then medics. Then silence. They found her collapsed on the floor, unresponsive. No pulse. Not breathing. White powder on her sleeve and a baggie clutched in her fist. They tried everything. CPR. Adrenaline. A defibrillator. But she was gone before anyone even realized she was in trouble. They say she had been dead for nearly half an hour. The timeline made sense. I had been waiting outside that door for nearly 20 minutes. She must have collapsed almost immediately. The music kept playing in the background, a rhythmic, heartless beat that seemed to mock the gravity of what was happening. The club didn't stop. People still danced. Others whispered, recorded, gawked. I stood outside the women's restroom, numb, while they zipped her into a black bag and carried her past me. The last time I saw Aliska, she was full of chaotic energy, laughter, and danger. The next time, she was a lifeless weight in someone else's hands. Her parents reached out later. They didn't blame me. They said she had been struggling for years. Rehab, relapses, a cycle that they had long grown exhausted from. They thanked me for trying to help her. Said she probably felt safe with me. But it didn't help. I still feel responsible. I still think that if I had just said no to that night, she might still be alive. I deleted Tinder the next morning. I haven't opened it since. Merrick asked me that evening, "Papa, where's the lady with the shiny jacket?" I told him she had to go away. He nodded and went back to his toy dinosaurs. I held him a little tighter that night, and every night since. It's weird how one lie can turn into a 4-year relationship. And by weird, I mean terrifying. Especially when the lie is your name and your entire identity. Let me explain. My name is Casper Lindegard. I'm 33 and work as a senior legal advisor at a firm that prides itself on long hours, overpriced coffee, and passive-aggressive emails. I'm not the office clown or the guy who brings in cupcakes. I'm the one in the corner cubicle, always working late, always replying with "per my last email," and deeply allergic to small talk. The truth is, I'm lonely. I didn't set out to deceive anyone, honestly. But you try being single in a workplace where even a sneeze gets dissected in the break room. I could already hear it. "Oh, did you hear? Casper from compliance is on Tinder now. Must be desperate." I didn't want the whispers. I didn't want the pity. So I did what any over-analytical, socially anxious overachiever would do. I made a fake profile. Enter Mikkel. Mikkel sounded relaxed, approachable, like a guy who wore denim jackets and used cologne that smelled like pine and confidence. Mikkel didn't stress about quarterly reports or get anxious before Zoom calls. He was the opposite of me. I uploaded a slightly older picture of myself, less corporate, more casual, and listed my job as freelance writer, because that sounded creative and mysterious. I figured I'd flirt a bit, maybe go on a date or two. Nothing serious. Just enough to remind myself that I was still human. Then I matched with Leaky. Her name alone made me pause. Leaky. It means happiness in Danish, which felt like a challenge in itself. Her profile was minimal. A few sun-drenched travel shots, a black and white sketch of a French cafe, and a one-sentence bio. Chasing light and good coffee. We started chatting that evening. She was witty, sarcastic in the best way, and never used emojis. I liked that. Our conversations were casual, but laced with curiosity. I told her I was Mikkel, a writer working on a piece about urban loneliness. She told me she was a designer, freelance mostly, with a love for strange museums and late-night walks. We messaged on and off for about a month. Nothing intense. Just tiny pebbles of connection that slowly built into something more. Eventually, we decided to meet. Her idea, not mine. "Let's do something weird," she said. "Like bingo." Bingo? I thought she was joking. I mean, who suggests a bingo hall for a first date? But she was serious. And weirdly, I loved it. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in jeans and a navy coat that I hoped screamed creative freelance guy, and not exhausted lawyer trying too hard. I sat at a table near the back, surrounded by pensioners shuffling cards and whispering numbers like they were state secrets. Then she walked in. Leaky was stunning. Not in a flashy, overdone way, but in the kind of way that made you forget what you were thinking. She wore a mustard yellow dress with tiny white flowers on it, and had a scarf tied around her neck like she'd just stepped out of a painting. Her hair was messy in an intentional way, and her eyes flicked across the room like she was collecting stories. She spotted me and smiled. "Mikkel?" "That's me," I said, standing up and offering my hand, which she ignored in favor of a hug. She smelled like bergamot and something citrusy. I tried not to look stunned. We sat down, and the conversation immediately clicked. No awkward silences. No forced small talk. We joked about the competitive elderly around us, made up fake bingo rivalries, and even got shushed by a woman in a purple sweater named Hedvig who took the game very seriously. It was perfect. 20 minutes in, Leaky leaned back, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You know, Mikkel, I was surprised to see you on Tinder." My heart stopped. "Surprised?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my brain started screaming. "Yeah, I didn't expect to run into anyone from my past, especially not from the firm." My stomach dropped into my shoes. The firm? I croaked. What do you mean? She smirked. Come on, Casper. I used to work in HR. Lindegard, head of legal affairs. I reviewed your CV when we were hiring for the compliance team. I know exactly who you are. I wanted to vanish, evaporate into the bingo cards, and become one with the retirees. Before I could respond, she burst out laughing. Relax. I don't care. I left that place 2 years ago. You've got nothing to worry about. I stared at her, stunned. Wait, you're not mad. Mad? No. Amused? Absolutely. You look like you just got caught stealing office supplies. We both started laughing, probably too loudly, and Hedvig gave us another death glare. The rest of the night was surreal. We played bingo like it was an Olympic sport, won a plastic trophy labeled Best Couple, thanks to a suspiciously generous announcer, and ended up walking to a nearby taco truck around midnight. She took my hand without asking, just laced her fingers through mine like we'd done it 100 times before. I didn't pull away. Over greasy tacos and shared laughter, I told her the truth. About the fake name, the fear of judgment, the loneliness that had driven me to create Mikkel in the first place. She listened, didn't interrupt, just nodded slowly and said, You know, I kind of figured. No freelance writer talks that confidently about EU trade law. We both laughed again and something shifted. The lie was out and she stayed. That night, we sat in her car for almost an hour, talking about everything childhood, family regrets. She told me about her sister's wedding in Portugal and how she once spent a week in a Norwegian fishing village just to paint boats. I told her about the time I accidentally sent a confidential memo to the entire office and blamed it on a software glitch. We kissed just before she dropped me off. It wasn't cinematic. There were no fireworks, but it felt safe, familiar, like something I didn't know I'd been craving. That was the beginning. We dated for 4 years. For ridiculous, beautiful years. We argued about laundry and paint colors, and once about how to properly store cheese. But we also traveled to obscure museums, hosted terrible dinner parties, and made each other laugh until we cried. Eventually, the Mikkel thing became a running joke. Hey Mikkel, she'd say whenever I forgot to take the bins out. Mikkel wouldn't forget. We moved in together after a year. Adopted a cat named Soren. Grew into each other's lives like ivy on a wall. I was curled up on my couch, a half-eaten bowl of popcorn by my side, and my phone glowing in my hand. Outside, the wind rustled the branches against the windows of my small apartment in New Orleans. I'd just turned 31, and after months of dancing around the idea, I finally gave in and re-downloaded Tinder. I told myself it was just for fun. Just a few harmless chats, maybe even a date if someone decent came along. I wasn't expecting anything serious, certainly not love. But I also wasn't expecting fear, paranoia, or the kind of twisted rabbit hole I'd soon find myself falling into. That's how I met Ben, or at least, that's what he called himself. Ben's profile was well put together. He had 3 pictures, one of him at a coffee shop, another hiking in what looked like the Rockies, and a final one of him laughing with friends. His bio was short but charming. Coffee addict. Amateur poet. Always up for an adventure. He had that kind of everyman appeal, nothing overly flashy, just a nice, clean profile that made him seem grounded. We matched late on a Tuesday night, and he messaged me first. Just a simple, hey there smiling face with smiling eyes. It was harmless. We started talking, and the conversation flowed easily. Favorite books, worst vacations, favorite pizza toppings. He was funny, respectful, and even a little shy in a way that made me lower my guard. After a few days, Ben suggested we meet up for a drink. I said I'd think about it, not because I didn't want to, but because something about him didn't quite sit right. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't anything he said specifically. It was more about what he didn't say. His answers sometimes felt too polished, as though he was trying to play a role rather than just be himself. That night, I found myself going down a path I never expected. I started Googling things like Tinder trafficking statistics and online dating safety tips. I wasn't looking for validation. I was looking for peace of mind. Instead, I found stories that made my skin go cold. One article from a national safety group reported that dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge had been increasingly exploited by traffickers. According to data from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, hundreds of cases had been linked to these platforms over the past decade. Young women, especially those between 16 and 25, were being targeted, not just in foreign countries, but in places like Florida, Ohio, and Louisiana. I kept reading. Some victims were lured in with promises of modeling gigs. Others were invited to exclusive parties, only to find themselves drugged and transported across state lines. There were stories of women who met men on dating apps, only to be isolated, manipulated, and eventually controlled, financially, emotionally, and physically. I started to panic. Ben had never said anything creepy. He hadn't pressured me or asked for anything inappropriate. But now every message from him made my stomach twist in knots. I remembered what my best friend Adele once told me. Your gut knows, listen to it. So I started doing some digging. I reverse searched his profile images. The hiking photo was a stock image. I found it on a travel blog from 2017. The coffee shop picture didn't show up anywhere else, but the third one, the group photo, was a dead end. No tags. No watermarks. Just a blurry image that could have been taken anywhere. Still, I wasn't ready to accuse Ben of anything. Maybe he used a stock photo for aesthetic reasons. Maybe he was just shy about posting real images. But the unease wouldn't go away. Our chats continued for another day or two, and I kept things casual. Then one night, something changed. We were talking about our favorite childhood memories, and I mentioned how I used to ride my bike around the neighborhood until sunset. He responded with a message that made my heart skip. Funny, I can actually picture you doing that. Wearing a red hoodie, right? I froze. I had never mentioned the red hoodie. It was something I wore all the time as a kid, but it wasn't in any of my photos or social media. It was such an oddly specific detail that I didn't know how to respond. I typed, "Wait, how did you know that?" and stared at the screen waiting. His reply came a minute later. "Just a guess. You seem like the type." I didn't reply. Not that night. Not ever again. Instead, I started reading more survivor accounts. I found a subreddit dedicated to women who had encountered dangerous men through dating apps. Their stories were terrifyingly similar. Charming profiles, casual conversations, sudden shifts into creepy territory. In some cases, they never even made it to the first date. In others, they barely escaped with their lives. One story in particular stuck with me. A woman named Natalie had matched with a man who seemed perfect. They talked for weeks before he invited her to a dinner party. Fortunately, her roommate insisted on tagging along. When they arrived, it wasn't a party. It was a nearly empty house with two other men. She and her roommate managed to leave, but later she found out that the house was under surveillance for suspected trafficking activity. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept my phone under my pillow and double-checked the locks on my doors. I deleted Tinder, blocked Ben, and backed up all my messages. The next day, I filed a report on the app and submitted what I had found to a local advocacy group that tracks suspicious profiles. I don't know if Ben was dangerous. I'll never know. But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I had trusted my instincts and I was safe. Still, the experience changed me. I started volunteering with a local organization focused on digital safety for women. We held workshops, created checklists for safe online dating, and shared resources on how to identify red flags. I spoke with survivors, listened to their stories, and realized how incredibly lucky I was to get away with just a scare. But here I am, 3 years later after that event, sitting in my modest apartment in Oaxaca, Mexico, and writing down the memory of the day I almost lost someone before I ever really had the chance to know her. It was the end of October, and the city was buzzing with preparations for Dia de los Muertos. The air was thick with the scent of marigolds, grilled meats, and sweet bread. Paper skeletons danced in the windows, and lanterns glowed with a haunting beauty. I had come to Mexico originally just to escape. The grind of work and rent in Austin, Texas had become unbearable. What started as a spontaneous trip turned into a permanent relocation. The city enchanted me with its colors, its people, and its rhythm. But after the honeymoon phase of my move wore off, the loneliness crept in like a slow fog. So I did what many of us do when we're feeling isolated. I downloaded Tinder. I wasn't expecting anything serious. Maybe some casual conversation, maybe a coffee date or two. But then I matched with Tina. Her profile was honest and unpretentious. She had a photo of herself in front of a mural in Coyoacan and another smiling, holding a street taco in one hand and a pineapple agua fresca in the other. Her messages were witty, warm, and refreshingly real. After a few days of chatting, we agreed to meet at a small cafe I'd been to before, one that served locally roasted coffee and had the best chocolate croissants outside of France. I arrived early, nervous energy coursing through me. When Tina walked in, dressed in a flowing sunflower yellow dress, I felt the air in my lungs pause. She was even more beautiful in real life, and when she smiled and said, "Hey Craig, you found me," I felt like I already knew her. The first hour was magic. We talked about everything from our favorite books to bizarre travel encounters. She told me about growing up in a small town in Oregon and how she had recently moved to Mexico to teach English and immerse herself in a new culture. I told her about my love for photography and my decision to leave behind the corporate world for something more meaningful, even if less stable. After our coffee and croissants, Tina suggested we take a little walk. There was a street vendor she liked nearby who sold grilled corn slathered in cheese and chili powder. I didn't hesitate. The sun was high, the streets were alive with music and chatter, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. Until it wasn't. We had just turned a corner when we heard a low, guttural growl. I looked up and froze. From behind a trash bin staggered a mangy street dog. It was medium-sized but looked famished, its ribs pressing against its skin, and its eyes wide with hunger and fear. It bared its teeth and snarled at us, saliva dripping from its mouth. Tina instinctively stepped back, but I remembered something from a travel safety blog. Don't run, don't move too fast. Still, the dog was already reacting. It lunged. I moved without thinking. I pushed Tina behind me and tried to shout and wave my arms in an effort to frighten the dog. The animal barked wildly, its eyes darting between us. I could feel Tina clutching the back of my shirt, her breathing rapid. Then the dog attacked. It lunged for Tina's leg, biting down with a ferocity that chilled my blood. She screamed, a sharp, guttural sound that cut through the bustling street. I tried to kick the dog away, yelling, grabbing at anything nearby. But it held on, growling, until suddenly a man appeared. Out of nowhere, he rushed at the dog with a large plastic bottle and sprayed water directly into its face. The dog yelped, startled, and released Tina's leg before bolting down the alley, disappearing into the shadows. Tina collapsed to the pavement, clutching her leg. Blood seeped through her fingers, running down to her ankle. My heart slammed in my chest as I knelt beside her. "Tina! Hey, stay with me. You're okay. You're okay." She was pale, trembling, her breath coming in short gasps. "It bit me," she whispered, her voice thin with shock. I nodded, trying to stay calm. People were starting to gather. Someone offered me tissues. Another person pulled out their phone. I called a taxi using an app, but the first driver canceled when I mentioned there was blood. The second one was more cooperative when I promised to pay extra. At the hospital, the minutes blurred into hours. The waiting room was filled with murmurs, beeping machines, and the smell of antiseptics. Tina was taken in quickly, and I stayed by her side, holding her hand and brushing her hair back from her face. She was still crying, but quieter now, as though the reality of what had happened was only just sinking in. The doctor confirmed that the bite had punctured skin deeply, but there were no broken bones. He cleaned the wound, gave her a tetanus shot, and began a series of rabies vaccinations just to be safe. He smiled gently. "She's going to be fine," he said in Spanish. I could have collapsed then, and there from the relief. Tina was discharged later that evening, her leg bandaged and her spirits slightly lifted. I helped her into the cab and took her back to her apartment. She invited me to stay for a while, and I did. We sat in her living room, drinking chamomile tea, both in shock but grateful. "I can't believe that happened," she said, shaking her head. "It felt like something out of a nightmare." I nodded. "Yeah, but I'm glad I was with you. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if you were alone." We didn't kiss that night. There was no romantic crescendo, just quiet understanding, and the kind of connection that forms when two people go through something terrifying and survive it together. Over the following weeks, we kept seeing each other. Slowly, the trauma of that day faded into the background, replaced by laughter, long walks, shared meals, and countless conversations. Tina fully recovered, though she still has a faint scar on her leg. Today, we sometimes joke that our first date was a literal dogfight. But underneath the humor is a shared memory that bonds us in a rare way, not just because of what happened, but because of how we responded to it.